Hello there, do you want to know how to play the Big Blue Man? Look no further, as I will do my best to explain how he works and how to play him effectively. I'm Sheldon, an Eternal 6 EU player who has played over 1.5k games of just Abrams. This video will go over the basics of how Abrams works and will include some examples of things you could do in your games to help out your team. Before this video starts, I will assume you know some basic knowledge about the game, essentially the stuff provided in the in-game tutorials and melee and parry mechanics. If you do not know about this stuff, you can have a quick read of it in-game in the Learn to Play section of the hideout, located to the right of where you spawn. Without further ado, let's get started on how to Abrams. To start, here is a picture of Abrams' base stats. There are two things to pay close attention to. One of them is that Abrams has a shotgun, so the bullet damage stat tells you the damage of each individual pellet in the spread of the shotgun. The other note is that the reload stat is special because currently Abrams is the only released hero that reloads his gun shell by shell, as opposed to the entire weapon when you're reloading. This is an important mechanic to be aware of, as it means you may interrupt your reloading to shoot your gun, provided you have ammo. It is very useful in the learning phase, and it helps with being able to secure souls. Overall, these stats make him quite a tanky character, and as you gain boons, you'll increase your stats like your bullet damage, melee damage, spirit power, and your HP, as well as acquiring new abilities or points to level up your abilities. As you can see by his movement speed, he is quite a slow character, so movement around the map at times can be challenging if you do not have any extra help from your abilities or other active items. Let's take a look at the abilities Abrams has that allows him to fight and sustain in engagements. Siphon Life is an AoE ability where activating it releases a blue cone in front of Abrams that damages both heroes and NPCs caught inside, and it will heal Abrams for 60% of the damage done per tick from heroes and 30% for NPCs. A special property of Siphon Life is that the radius also scales depending on how much spirit power you have, essentially more spirit, bigger cone. At the level 1 upgrade, Siphon Life gets a cooldown reduction of 19 seconds. At level 2, it gains an extra 2 seconds of uptime, and at level 3, the damage of it increases by 38. This ability also combos very nicely with his shoulder charge, which I'll explain shortly. Generally, you want to use this ability when people are close to you so you can drain their HP while you're shooting or punching them. Maxing out Siphon Life is a good option to consider in the early stages of the game, as it makes killing people a lot easier with the large damage increase, plus any additional spirit items you may have thrown into the mix. You can pop this ability right before or during your shoulder charge ability for the best damage output. Shoulder charge is a crowd control type ability where upon activating it, Abrams will charge forward and he will drag any heroes standing in his path. If Abrams bumps into a wall whilst dragging any number of heroes, he will stun them for a short duration. After stunning your enemies, you can attack them right away, most commonly with melee attacks as they do more damage. At the level 1 upgrade, Abrams gains a plus 25% weapon damage bonus for 8 seconds, which amplifies both his melee and bullet damage. At level 2, an extra 0.45 seconds added to the stun duration. This is an important upgrade as this allows you to heavy melee after charging into someone. If you try to do this before you have your charge at level 2, enemies will have time to parry you, which is pretty much a death sentence in the early game. So before that point, you only have time to use light melee attacks. And finally, at level 3, the cooldown gets shaved off by 22 seconds, meaning you can charge more frequently. This ability is very good for disrupting fights and displacing enemies, and makes for a good source of movement if you want to charge away from danger. Abrams' third ability is Infernal Resilience, which will grant him the ability to regenerate a portion of the damage he takes from other players over time. It also comes with plus 1 health regen to his base health regen of 1.5 to make him have 2.5 regen when unlocked. Abrams regenerates 12% of the incoming damage he takes over a 20-second period. It may not seem like much, but combined with Siphon Life and the help of some items, it can become a pretty good source of healing and complement Siphon very nicely. At the level 1 upgrade, Abrams receives an extra 1.5 health regen. At level 2, Abrams gains a bonus 150 max HP to his current health pool, and at level 3, Abrams regenerates an extra 7% of damage over time. This ability is affected by your healing amp status, meaning if you have an item like Healing Booster on, the amount of damage you regenerate increases as well. Finally, Abrams' ultimate ability unlocked at 3.6k souls is Seismic Impact, where Abrams will rise into the air holding his book and you can aim where you want him to crash land and everyone caught in the area of effect will be stunned. At the level 1 upgrade, the cooldown is reduced by 35 seconds. At level 2, for each hero that you hit with your ultimate, you gain a temporary buff of plus 100 HP and plus 15% to fire rate. And finally, at level 3, you gain the Unstoppable status effect when you cast your ult, and it lingers for a few seconds after you drop down. It's good for a lot of things, such as helping engaging onto players, escaping fights, and it can be helpful to secure a mid boss for your team while the Rejuvenator is dropping. But be warned, this ability is also very buggy and sometimes it will not work even on direct connection with an enemy. Another bug with Abrams' ult is that if you happen to land next to a wall, then there's a chance that you can get stuck on it. So please try to avoid landing directly next to walls. Abrams historically has been pretty oppressive in lane, but nowadays he's been toned down quite a lot, and now he's weaker at the start of the game. I will go through some of the things you can do to help your laning phase out. One of Abrams' main strengths in lane is being able to secure enemy troopers relatively safely. This is because there are very few heroes in the game that can directly walk up to an Abrams behind cover and contest him head on. Most risk being charged into a wall, meleeed and gunned down by both Abrams and his lane partner. Using this information, it's best to position yourself very close to cover on the ground while you're securing the troopers. You almost never want to play on the bridge as you're exposed to the enemy laners and you'll receive a lot of damage in exchange for dealing out hardly any. A very good spot for Abrams in the lane is the Cosmic Veils located on the sides of the lanes, as they conceal his position. Almost nobody will walk up and try to contest you sitting there, and you can shoot the troopers without them attacking you. Another strength of Abrams in lane is his ability to tank a lot of damage, as he will regenerate some of it back with his passive. It also allows him to be less easy to bully out of a lane, meaning he can stay in there and absorb quite a bit of damage while still gaining souls and looking for kill opportunities on the lane. How you play the lane is also dependent on how you're spending your ability points too. Having your shoulder charge at level 2 is a huge power spike during the lane, as now you can heavy melee heroes after charging them, without fear of being parried. If you throw in melee items like melee lifesteal and melee charge too, you can take off quite a bit of HP with one charge plus melee, which will help both you and your lane partner kill players faster. Abrams synergizes very well with a lane partner that has some form of crowd control because it can either set him up for a charge combo, or in other cases it can set up the other person's ability, like Warden's Binding Word, so it is important to consider how well your abilities mesh with whoever you're laning with. After the laning phase is over, you should check to see if you have any power spikes you can purchase, and then you should look at being active on the map after buying them. Being active on the map can include joining up with other teammates on different lanes to take any remaining towers, help out any other lanes that may have struggled during the laning phase, or potentially finding isolated targets you have the power to take down quickly in enemy jungle. As described in the in-game hero select screen, Abrams is a tank and a brawler, meaning he specializes in being in sustained engagements with enemies, positioned front and center in the heart of the action. To play him effectively in teamfights is a few goals to keep in mind of what you need to achieve. One of those things is to sustain for as long as possible during teamfights and become a massive annoyance for the enemy team to deal with, positioning yourself right on the front line to make space for your backline damage dealers like Kaze and Mirage to dish out lots of damage. A way to enhance how much of a nuisance you are to the enemy team is to focus on attacking their damage dealers with your abilities, as they are typically the squishier heroes amongst their team with low HP pools that a simple charge plus melee combo could delete very easily. You also want to make sure your damage dealers are safe and protect them from anyone trying to dive at them. In terms of builds, you can check them out yourself in-game in the public section of the Browse Build tab. Usually there are a few good ones marked as top daily. It's up to you on what you'd like to choose, find something that works for you most importantly. I have a few of my own builds I can recommend using. They're pretty solid and work for me most of the time usually. I'll leave the build IDs for those builds in the description if you wish to try them out. They come with some items annotated so you can see why I've chosen them and when it would be good to buy them. There's lots of other useful techniques and tricks that Abrams players can utilize, but I won't be covering them all in this video because I still want to keep things short and simple for people. If you want to know more however, stay tuned until the end of the guide and I'll tell you where you can find more tips. I will be covering how to avoid one of the most common counters to Abrams players, parrying. Abrams players need to understand how to bait out parries of opponents, otherwise against more skilled opponents you'll be repeatedly stunned from parries and die. Baiting out a parry means you have free reign to get punches in for a few seconds, without the risk of being stunned from parries. There's two ways to do this. You can do it normally or with a heavy melee cancel, or HMC for short. Normal parry baiting is simply charging up your heavy melee and turning to the side to not actually hit your opponent. You make them think that you're going to do that, but instead you intentionally miss. You can also naturally bait out a parry by just holding W at your opponent and getting close. People will sometimes randomly parry to try and predict a light melee, as you cannot react to them like a heavy melee. My main advice for this is to mix things up when you're shooting someone and light meleeing them to keep them always guessing. A HMC is performed by doing a heavy melee attack and then pressing an active in order to cancel the action completely. There's only a few actives that work with this, however. The two most commonly used by Abrams players are Fleetfoot and Colossus. Fleetfoot is generally a very cheap tier 2 item that only costs 1.6k souls, and Colossus is generally a decent item to have on Abrams that increases tankiness. This is a much more effective method of parry baiting because it is a lot more convincing than just turning to the side and intentionally missing. We pretty much reached the end of the video. I do have some extra things to talk about if you would like some more useful information though. I didn't cover a lot of the movement options for Abrams as it can get quite advanced, but if you would like to know more about movement, you should check out the Deadlock movement wiki. It contains all of the various movement texts in-game, including video examples of how to do them. You can learn a few to help Abrams feel better to play and not as slow to maneuver around the map. Other than that, if you're in the Deadlock Discord, you can view the Abrams channel and ask other people in there, or myself, any additional questions you have about Abrams. I'm also trying to get back into streaming and will try to stream when I can over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SheldonTV. You can watch me playing mostly Abrams over there. I hope this guide was useful to you in some way. Thank you for watching. Until next time.